All right, just taking a quick look at this new Allpowers Volix P300. So this is interesting. We haven't seen any new products from Allpowers in a while. And it looks like they've kind of decided to get back in the game by copying some of the biggest competitors here, right? First off, the name, Volix. It's pretty similar to Solex, isn't it? From Anchor. And then this design almost looks like a direct copy of the EcoFlow River 3, doesn't it? Except it's got a handle built in that folds up. So kind of interesting, I would say, actually, honestly, it looks a little bit nicer than the River 3. So they did make, that one improvement, but you want to know, did they make any improvements to the specs here? And especially when we're talking about, comparing it to their old model, the R600. How does it compare to that? Well, this thing is actually much smaller. So the R600 was actually one of the most powerful power stations in the 300 watt-hour size class. But it was pretty big and bulky. I mean, it was almost 13 pounds. Whereas this is only 8.8 pounds. So a huge weight reduction. Now, the thing is, it's still heavier than the River 3. And then for the power of this thing, it's got less power actually than the R600. So it's only 300 watts. So that's a 300 watt AC inverter, and it surges to 600 watts. There's no mention of that voltage reduction feature. Whereas the River 3 does have that feature, but it can only do, appliances up to 600 watts, that X boost. So typically, if you want to use kettles and hot plates and toasters, you would need to have it higher than that. That's where, if you want to do that kind of stuff with a tiny power station, you want to look at the Bluetti Elite 30 version 2. That thing's got the best versatility with a small inverter. And then interesting, they say that this thing's only got a 100 watt Type C, and they actually repeat that in the listing description. But if you actually zoom in, you'll see that it does say it's 140 watt. So it's kind of interesting. They need to fix that or clarify that. And then there's a couple of quick charge USB-As as well. And then this is real interesting. The car socket. There is a car socket 12 volt outlet, but the voltage range 11.2 to 14.4 volts. So interesting. It's not regulated. But yet that voltage range is completely acceptable for 12 volt appliances. And this could actually almost be a good thing, because without it, with it not being regulated, it would be more efficient. So because you're just basically pulling power straight from the battery. And so you might be wondering, well, if this is the case, why don't all power stations do it that way? And it's because this thing is actually using 4 LFP batteries in series, which would actually give you a voltage range of 10 to 14.6 volts. So kind of interesting that basically with this little graphic here, you can see that they're restricting the amount, basically the depth of discharge. They're restricting that actually quite a lot on the low end, right? Because 11.2 is way higher than 10. So basically you can never actually get this thing down to the true 0% of the battery's capacity, which is great for longevity. And by the way, these LFP cells, they're saying 4,000 cycles to 70% of capacity. So not to 80%, so these definitely aren't the best cells on the market. But still, these are going to last, a long, long time. Now for charging, this is where it's a little disappointing, because they really downgraded the specs compared to the R600. And yes, the R600 did have a little bit more capacity. But still, it is kind of disappointing. But anyways, the charging from the AC from grid power is still really fast. So you can pump 300 watts into this thing. And remember, it's only 256 watt hours. And basically, it doesn't look like they're doing much throttling, because 50 minutes, the full thing, the full charge. So that's like top of the class specs. But then for solar, it's only 110 watts. Whereas the R600 could do 220. It could do double. And the R600 too, it could do up to 60 volts. Now, they don't give the voltage range on this new model, on this new Volix. But usually 110 watts, that's typically only up to 30 volts, right? Now, kind of the most useful aspect of a power station this size is to use it for UPS, right? Because typically if you're powering, a computer, really a computer is the only thing you really need a UPS for, right? So yeah, if you're powering that, most computers are like around 100 watts, maybe 150 watts. So you don't need a big inverter. And in fact, you don't want a big inverter, right? Because it would just be completely wasteful. And, a power station with a bigger inverter always has a bigger battery and they're more expensive. This is like the perfect size, right? So it does get the 10 millisecond switchover. And that's where the regular EcoFlow River 3, just the standard River 3, does not get a 10 millisecond switchover. It's got the 20 millisecond switchover. If you want the faster switchover with the EcoFlow product, you got to step up to the River 3 Plus. Now, of course, the Bluetti, that Elite 30 that I mentioned earlier, of course, that has a 10 millisecond UPS as well. And so while this thing might be perfect for that kind of use case, it's still missing some nice features that the R600 did have. Number one was the LED light. There's no light on this new model. I wish every power station should have a light, right? Because if the power goes out, you'd have light, right at your fingertips until you can figure out something else, right? So, and then the other aspect is, like a lot of other brands, they got rid of the wireless charger. But still, this is a solid offering from Allpowers, right? And I'm kind of glad to see that they're still in business, basically, and they're still making new products. Yeah, I wish they didn't, it wasn't so obvious that they, maybe copy is too strong of a word, but they definitely took inspiration, from Anchor and EcoFlow here. But, if you want something, some people, don't want to buy Bluetti, Anchor, EcoFlow, Jackery, everybody has those. If you want something a little bit different and something that does really look nice, they did a great job on the design here. It looks like a premium product. You might want to take a look at this Volix P300.